The Bradford seminar. I'm very, very pleased today to host and introduce Senator Andrew Zwicker. I usually keep my introductions short and don't need to write a paper about it, but today this was not possible. So Senator Zwicker, that's his title right now, but he is first and foremost, in his own words, a physicist, a science educator, and a science communicator. In fact, his other job when he's not in the NJ Senate is as head of strategic partnerships and public engagement at the Princeton Plasma Physics Lab, which is across Route 1. It's a lab that's actually part of Princeton University. In fact, also, I'm very happy because I'm returning the favor to Andrew, who twice introduced me at the Science on Saturdays lecture series at PPPL. If you don't know what that is, it's really a fantastic outreach and communication event that is organized every Saturday at PPPL. Andrew has been the coordinator for this for quite a while. That basically brings people from Princeton and other and scientists from New Jersey to basically communicate their science to the broader audience. And you can tell from actually this activity how interested and passionate Andrew is about communicating science and reaching the public. Andrew received his PhD in physics from the Johns Hopkins University in 1992. He did some postdocs in national labs before joining another national lab, PPPL, in 1997. And through his research first there as a scientist and his educational activity, he was recognized as Fellow of the American Physical Society. And the American Association of Physics Teachers named him to its list of 75 leading contributors to physics education. And these are just two of the recognitions that I will mention today. Andrew also often crossed Route 1 to our main campus. So at Princeton, he was a lecturer in the writing program and an faculty advisor to freshmen and sophomore, and to the women's soccer team. This is very important. And so because science, education, and physics were not fulfilling Andrew's ambition fully, at some point, I think around 2014, 2015, he decided to basically that if you want to make a real impact, you have to go where the decisions are really getting made. So he ran successfully to become an NJ General Assembly representative in 2016, then ran for NJ State Senator again successfully in 2022. And we've been really lucky to have Andrew there because since he joined, he was a true champion of science-informed policymaking and was key to many initiatives in the state legislature to connect the legislature to the vast and deep talent of researchers at New Jersey University. So with that, I won't welcome you here, Andrew, because this is your institution, but I will leave the floor to you to tell us about the exciting new activity you're spearheading, and thanks a lot for accepting the invitation.
Thank you. Thank you, Ali. And also thank you for changing the time. I know this is not the normal time. I did literally just come from the State House, which is why I'm dressed like this, and I still have my pin on, which that plus $5 gets me a cup of coffee at Starbucks. So, and Ellie, I was going to. So I've invited you twice, I think, right, to give these lectures. We just concluded the 2024 year. I thought you were going to ask me the three questions, so I asked all three.
Oh, I did. I should have done that. That
right.
Was a good idea.
So when did you first get interested in science? Name a teacher who was influential with you at any point in your whole career, from elementary school to PhD, and something you like to do when you're. So right now, I'll ask myself these questions, and I will also say I'm beyond thrilled. Just real quick, I'll answer those questions in a second. But knowing that I wanted to come and talk to you about the Green Amendment and whether we should have a constitutional right to clean air and clean water, I was fortunate enough that I've been working hand in hand in New Jersey with the national leader when it comes to getting states to do a Green Amendment. And so she's going to join me in a few minutes, but Maya Van Rossum is here, who literally wrote the book. And it's done more, if Ellie was trying to embarrass me, I'm going to try to embarrass Maya, has literally done more to push this notion that we have a fundamental right. It's not a privilege, but a right in this country to clean air and clean water. And she's going to share some of what's happening in New Jersey, but also some of what's happening around the country. Because when we talk about this, we are talking about, of course, public policy, but we're also talking about politics. And we're talking about a variety of different interest groups who, no one is going to say we don't have a right to clean air or clean water, but plenty of groups are going to say, but we should never enshrine it into our Constitution. So we're going to get into that, and we're going to make this very much a discussion. So very quickly, second grade Mrs. Sullivan, who I can't believe I'm about to say this, I was painfully shy. I would barely speak, but I was an early reader, and Mrs. Sullivan decided the way to get me out of my shell was to get me to read to the class, and I've never forgotten that. First got interested in science. More was engineering. I used to take things apart, sort of cliche type of thing, and never quite put them back together, which is why I'm a physicist and not an engineer, because if you have a few extra parts, you're like, whatever, who cares? If you're an engineer, of course, that's the worst thing ever. And something that I like to do when I turned 40, I taught myself how to fall off a surfboard, which is easy. It's harder to stay on the surfboard, but my birthday's in the middle of May, and I go to the Jersey Shore. The water is painfully cold. And as long as the water's not dangerous, the waves aren't dangerous, then I'll go out there and surf. It's the most zen-like, amazing thing to do ever. So there's my answers to I don't think I've ever answered the 3 questions. I've asked it hundreds of times. So and Professor Muzzerall has also given an early talk there. I do. That you gave that talk? No. My goodness. Yes. And I missed you because I was away. Oh my God, now I know who you are. Thank you for that. So, and we have Chuck. Chuck is my neighbor, so, right? And this is Dave Pringle, an environmental leader and a Princeton grad class of 88, who, by the way, I am the person who's trying to turn ultimate Frisbee into the official state sport. And Dave played on the Princeton ultimate Frisbee team in 1988, I guess, right? Coincidence? I think not. So, okay, so I guess I'm going to start, and I sort of heard from Ellie sort of who you are and where you are. I'm going to start at the end, and I'm going to ask Maya to jump in pretty quickly, because this is Monday. So Thursday, in front of the Senate Environment Committee, was the first time in years a committee hearing on the Green Amendment. And Maya was there, and Dave was there, and I was there, and so were a whole bunch of other people. And it came out of the committee partisan, right? 3-1, and who abstained? Got it. So it's become partisan, right? And so just be clear, right? This is should New Jersey put into its constitution, right, you have the right to clean air and clean water. And it's become partisan. And of course, you can unpack that in so many different ways. Anybody know which United States president since 1960, let's say from 1960 to present, which United States president has been the most consequential president for the environment? Start with Kennedy and go through Biden. Which president? Positive. Which have been the most positive United States president since 1960? Anybody know? Yeah, this is a crowd that would know that, right? This is one of the only. It's Nixon, right? So my point being, one, it didn't used to be that way. 2, if you have not seen Jon Stewart, the old Jon Stewart, talk about this, you should Google this, because of course it's hysterical as he goes through all of that, including a variety of different pieces of that. But Richard Nixon is the most consequential and pro-environment president in the last 60 years. I mean, just a fact. So there's so much to unpack there. I think what I want to do, though, is jump in and ask Maya. Yeah, right?
Anyway, but it's really an honor to be here with Senator Zwicker. He's a true champion for the environment and environmental rights. And if you don't know that, you should know that. And so is Dave, who I guess walked out.
Well,
it's
you started speaking.
I know, it's like, man, But Dave has really, in terms of working with legislators and in the legislature in advancing the Green Amendment. He's been really amongst the leads. There he is. You needed lunch. Okay. So I'm going to go into the elements of a Green Amendment in 1 second, but just 2 points, right? All of us here, well, they're policy people, right? If you're paying attention and you care about the environment, at one point or another, you've attended a rally or a press conference or something, and somebody stands up and says, we have a right to clean water, and we have a right to clean air. And yes, you do have an inalienable, indefeasible, inherent human right to a clean, safe, and healthy environment. But that right is of no value if you can't defend it legally, right? So then it's powerful intellectually and emotionally, but when you walk into the courtroom, if you go and say to a judge, I have a right to clean water, he's going to say, good for you. See you later, right? So the Green Amendment movement is about transforming that. So I'm going to quickly just go through what the elements of a Green Amendment are. The other thing to know is there are lots of environmental rights amendments in state constitutions across our nation. There are only 3 states with a Green Amendment that lift up environmental rights to highest constitutional standing and have the elements of what I dubbed a Green Amendment when I wrote my book. The first, most important non-sacrificable element to a Green Amendment is it has to be in the Bill of Rights or Declaration of Rights section of the Constitution. That is where we recognize the other human, civil, and political rights we hold dear, the right to free speech, freedom of religion, private property rights, the right to bear arms. We all know how powerfully those rights are protected, in no small part because of this Bill of Rights placement. If we want our environmental rights to have that same most powerful protection, legally, constitutionally, it needs to be in the same part of the Constitution. We need to be clear about what we're protecting, these essentials of life: water, air, climate, ecosystems, and environment. We're not talking about things like the right to navigate waterways, the right to fish, hunt, trap, to conserve lands. These may all be important things, but they're fundamentally different than the right to clean water and clean air. By the language, along with that Bill of Rights placement, we have to be clear that all government officials in the state, not just in the state legislature, but all government officials, from the local town council to the legislature to the governor's office, the attorney general's office, all the regulatory agencies are constitutionally bound to protect the enumerated environmental rights of the people, and they have to protect these rights equitably for all people, regardless of race, ethnicity, tribal affiliation, wealth, gender, or geography. Ideally, Green Amendments are generational. They protect these rights and the natural resources of a state for present and future generations, not just for those of us who are here today. Generational protection requires long-term thinking, requires considering cumulative impacts, and not just thinking about cumulative impacts, but addressing them in your decision-making. Being clear about what the science is and what the implications are, near-term, but also long-term. Ideally, a Green Amendment identifies the state as the trustee of the natural resources of the state. I mean, non-legal terms, sort of the caretaker of the state, with the obligation to protect the natural resources of the state for the benefit of the beneficiaries, who are the people. That means the people get prioritized every time government officials act. They can't be passing legislation or issuing permits with the primary goal of helping their buddies in the legislature or their friends who are in industry make more profits. It has to be about protecting natural resources, number one, for the people, ideally, including present and future generations. Goal of a Green Amendment is to get better decisions in the first place, right? Advance the good, prevent the bad. The reality of a Green Amendment is when our government officials fundamentally violate our environmental rights, we, the people, can hold them accountable in court. The Green Amendment movement at this point, since I founded it in 2014, we won't go into the ins and the outs of the hows and the whys, but it is a national movement. 3 states, Pennsylvania, Montana, and New York, in that order, have Green Amendments, each with their own story, New York being the most recent. But all the states in light green have had Green Amendment language proposed, and those in yellow are either right now in the organizing stages, or we're anticipating Green Amendment language like super soon. Like in Michigan and Wisconsin, the language has been worked up, just hasn't been officially proposed yet. So New Jersey has the opportunity to be the fourth state in the nation to have a green amendment. If New Jersey passes the legislation that Senator Zwicker has sponsored, New Jersey would actually be the first state in the nation to explicitly protect the right of the people to a safe climate. So it can be number 4, but it can be number 1. And I didn't know if you wanted to go, Senator, through the language.
No, I mean, so this is the details of it right now, but you can see there's these 3 right here, and Maya just went through it. Every person has a right. The state's natural resources are defined, and that's really important as well. And then she mentioned, right, the state shall serve as trustee of these resources. That's important legally. And then 3, getting some of the legal pieces of it in terms of self-executing, conferred by the public trust doctrine, common law, et cetera. It takes, and why I'm so happy to share this moment with Maya, it takes, I mean, I didn't say this, but also a lawyer, not just an advocate, but a lawyer, to make sure that what we're writing into the Constitution will do exactly what it is that we need it to do. And I think the key point also is for generations to come. So, we learn from what Pennsylvania has done. We learn from what New York has done. We learn what from Montana has done. And the idea is to even go farther than that and to be, as you pointed out, number 1. So there's the language in that section. And as Maya said, it's important where it goes in the Constitution. It's not just that we write it at the end, but where it goes. So, oops.
We're not going to be able to pass it back and
Yeah.
forth.
All right. Well, we'll do something like that. All right. So, anyway, next slide. What do you have next?
Yeah.
I don't even know what you have next.
I think that's it. I pretty much cut everything out.
So, all right.
The URL.
Yeah.
And there's lots of information up here. There is some copies of language. There are some short fact sheets. There are some stickers and a really cool sticker. This artwork was done by a high school student.
Right.
You look at it up close, it's amazing. So there's some information here if you want to.
So I want to spend a few minutes, before we start really discussing it, I want to spend a few minutes talking about why we don't have a Green Amendment. And what exactly are we hearing from the other side? Because business groups, what a surprise, have come out strongly against this. And Maya has all the statistics. As I say, how about this? We'll role play it. I'll be the business group, and you can be the response. Right? So for example, what is Maya trying to do? What are these other states trying to do? We're trying to give another tool in the toolbox for any citizen in this state to use the court system when they feel like an environmental injustice has occurred. And so the obvious first one is, well, wait a minute, you're opening up a Pandora's box of frivolous lawsuits, of unnecessary lawsuits. You're going to unleash lawsuits that will actually be used to slow down environmental progress. And we've studied this, right, across every state that's had it, and the answer would be?
I can give the answer, and I did put those slides if you want me to share them. You have to decide. Okay, yeah. So the number of lawsuits in the 3 states that have a Green Amendment on average a year, 3 to 10. That's it. In the state of New York, where we've had a Green Amendment for just over 2 years, the maximum number of lawsuits filed in a given year is 6. So that's between the 3 to 10. None, zero lawsuits dismissed as frivolous. But despite the fact that that is an often, used refrain, frivolous lawsuit, the sky is going to fall, we have now added a sentence to say, no frivolous lawsuits, which, by the way, you can't do anyway without getting into trouble. But we just added the language, so it's right there. But not an onslaught of litigation in every single case that has been pursued has been to address serious issues of significant concern. But ideally, we're avoiding lawsuits because we're all able to advocate for our environmental rights, and our government officials can't just say, well, it's my opinion to protect the environment or not to protect the environment. All government officials have taken an oath of office to uphold the Constitution. So when you advocate for your environmental rights, all government officials have to listen in a much more meaningful way, and it's much harder for them to ignore protecting your environmental rights. But when they do, you can now go to court.
Is that my parking ticket or yours? It's mine.
Is that, oh, that's, oh, good, I'm not paying that.
So the other thing to just very quickly talk about, and it's another argument against doing this, is that the legislature is giving up its responsibility. It's passing on some of its primary responsibility to the courts, and we shouldn't do that. We should keep it within the legislature itself. So a couple of things very quickly. One, most of us either have, some of you may have lived in California, but California is the one you read the most about, where the ballot initiative, you put a certain number of signatures onto the ballot and it'll show, get a certain number of signatures onto a petition and you get something onto the following ballot. New Jersey does not have that. And so the way it works is you, the people, will have a chance to vote on it, but only if we, the legislature, allow you to do it. And that's where we are right now. So the way it works in New Jersey is that any amendment of any kind to the Constitution must first pass the legislature, and then it goes to the people for a vote. So you can imagine if you were this November to see a question that said, do you believe that New Jersey has the right, people in New Jersey have a right to clean air, clean water, et cetera, it will pass overwhelmingly, because it passes overwhelmingly in any state where the people are allowed to make that decision. So where we are right now is, so I mentioned it quickly in my introductory remarks, we had, like anything else, it has to go through a committee hearing, it has to pass through full votes of the houses. In this case, does not need to go to the governor for a signature. It's just the responsibility of the legislature. So we took an important first step on Thursday, but we have a bunch more steps to do before we can get there. So the other thing we heard from the business groups was, shame on you, legislature, because you're giving up your responsibility. But the reality is you have had ballot questions in front of you regularly. We just legalized cannabis, for example. So that's interesting, right? The business community said nothing to us about putting cannabis up for an amendment to the Constitution. But when we put up the Green Amendment, they said it's the worst thing we could possibly do because we're giving up our authority. And it's interesting, why did we have to go to the Constitution? Why did we have to amend the New Jersey Constitution to legalize pot? Is because we could not get enough of my colleagues to vote to do that. And so we just said, let's put it up for the people. So there's a lot of inconsistency. There's a lot of politics at play. Ellie mentioned quickly, I happen to be, just for what this is worth, I think one of 5 physicists in the country who was either, you can decide, brave enough or dumb enough to enter into politics. Because you, as scientists, we think logically, right? And politics is anything but logic. So before we open it up to questions, you have...
Just really two things on this giving up of responsibility. First and foremost, right, the legislators aren't giving up anything, because fundamentally, the right to guide what the legislators can and cannot do lies with the people in the form of the Constitution, right? That is how we, the people, tell the legislators what we will and will not allow them to do. And what we have said over the years is we have certain inherent, inalienable, indefeasible rights that we, the people, say to you, the legislators, you may not infringe upon. Free speech, freedom of religion, private property rights. Now, what this does is says to the people, what do you want to put into your Constitution about the environment in order to guide all government action, legislature and otherwise? So this is not giving away any power. This is embracing the right of the people to decide. The other thing is, and the senator also alluded to, is the businesses say, well, you're giving your power away to the courts, as though somehow the courts are just having this new, unforeseen role in constitutional law and environmental protection. Look, in New Jersey, across the United States, there are three branches of government, right? The executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. There is nothing new or extraordinary or different or weird about saying to the courts that when it comes to environmental protection and protecting the environmental rights of the people, that there is a role for the courts when there is a dispute between the people and their government, right, and the legislature. So this is not the legislators giving away any power. This is the legislators going to the people and asking for your guidance. And this is about making clear to the judiciary when there is a question of environmental rights, there is a role for you, right? So this is really about embracing our process of democracy here in New Jersey. This is not about legislators giving away anything.
Yeah. Okay, so with that was quick, but what we would really like to do is turn this into a conversation on policy, on politics, on the New Jersey environment, anything that you would like to talk about. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So either we have to pass it by a supermajority, so we run 2-year sessions, and we either have to, within a session, pass it by a supermajority once. Do you have that slide?
There
Oh,
we go.
there we go. Supermajority once, or, there we go, there you go, or a simple majority twice. That was written into our Constitution as a way to then amend the Constitution. Pass through, blah, 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 majority of the people. Okay.
3/5 or majority.
Or the majority.
And then it goes to
Right.
the people. No role for the governor.
Right. No, I said that quickly.
Yeah.
So we are in year 1 of a new session. If we can continue to build the political momentum in the Capitol, it's going to be very hard to get to a supermajority because of that. I was alluding to it. Unfortunately, it's become partisan. We would need it to be a bipartisan amendment to get to a supermajority, which would mean anytime in this calendar year, pass it once. January 1 of next year would count, whenever we go into session again, and then it would show up in the following November ballot.
So the partisanship brings me to a question for Maya.
Yeah, Maya, you're up.
So Maya, how did you manage in Montana?
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
so that, like, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
because that might hold
Yeah.
key lessons for other places.
Yeah, yes and no. First of all, I did just ask our counting guru over there with legislators, and we have 3 or 4 R's still that are signed on in support to this version of the amendment.
We have a shot. Okay, good.
So, in fact, I get to,
That's our whip count voter.
this is, and he also, well, I was going to say he whips them to make them sponsor, but, oh, I just said it. Never mind, cut it out.
Too late.
Too late.
My political career's over anyway.
There you go. I don't have one, so I'm cool. The thing is, Montana, Pennsylvania, and New York each have a different story, and the truth is, Pennsylvania was the first state in the nation to pass the Green Amendment, and it passed in 1971. But it almost, as soon as it was passed, and by the way, it went through the Pennsylvania legislature twice, passed by unanimous vote, and then passed by a vote of the people 4-1. But then, very, very quickly, because of bad decisions in terms of lawyers and judges, the amendment was robbed of its legal strength for 42 years, until I, in my role as the Delaware Riverkeeper, and 7 towns challenged the pro-fracking law, arguing that Pennsylvania's Green Amendment was being violated by this very pro-fracking law. Won't go into the details. And the long and the short of it is, a very conservative Pennsylvania Supreme Court said we were right and overturned 42 years of bad precedent and breathed life into Pennsylvania's amendment. That's Pennsylvania's story. Montana's amendment was passed in 1972. It really didn't get its first legal use until, did I say 1972? 1972. It didn't get its first legal use until about the year 2000. There were a couple of good cases. It went kind of quiet until it picked back up again in about 2019 in an industrial gold mining case. And actually, Montana's amendment is the foundation upon which the Held v. Montana youth climate victory was achieved. If you look at all the other cases being pursued on that front, they all lose, except for Montana. Because Montana has Green Amendment, the other states do not. The only exception to that I anticipate will be Hawaii for other reasons. New York, so therefore, New York is actually the most relevant. New York, we secured a Green Amendment in November 2021. It was passed by a vote of over 70% of the people. And then it became part of the New York Constitution, January 1 of 2022. And the truth is, it's kind of like, what the senator said. I mean, it's really what we're doing in New Jersey right now, really focusing on the legislators, getting them to be the champion for the people, to say, look, it's not up to you to decide about the Constitution and whether to amend it. It's up to the people. All we're asking is for you to give the people the opportunity to decide. And so that's what we did in New York. We focused on the legislators. They passed it through their legislative process twice, and then it went before the people, and it was just about spreading the word. And it passed overwhelmingly. So in terms of New Jersey, that's kind of where we're at. It's most like what happened in New York. Other states where we've got more conservative dynamics and politics, it's functioning differently. But for New Jersey and what's happening in New Jersey, New York is really our most near geographically and in time, guide.
More questions? Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming to speak with us today.
Of course.
The intent of this is to shift some of the power to the people that tend to bring lawsuits, I would imagine, when there's most laws like this, they're going to be mostly white and affluent. And I'm wondering if you thought at all about how this might deepen racial inequalities when it comes to environmental justice issues, or anything around that you might be able to add to the safeguards to make sure that this isn't just being applied as well.
Yeah. So I would argue, and see what you think of this will do exactly the opposite. Because what we see in New Jersey is, let's say using Newark as an example, tremendous amount of air pollution for a variety of different reasons, including building or proposed buildings, both existing and some future ones, related to the burning of fossil fuels. And so I would disagree, because what this will do will give power to the people of any of these towns where we really need environmental justice, the ability to also then work with like-minded lawyers to break down some of the racial inequality that is occurring when it comes to environmental justice. So that's...
I mean, I guess, where are those communities going to get those resources to pursue this?
I'll turn it over to a lawyer, but there are a lot of lawyers out there who are working to get things done, and a lot of people willing to help make sure those lawyers have the resources they need. I see your skeptical face, but I'll turn it over to a lawyer.
So be skeptical, but don't be skeptical. I mean, the truth is environmental racism is legal across New Jersey and across the nation. It's really baked into the system of laws. So for many of the environmental situations that you're talking about, where communities of color, indigenous communities, and low-income communities are being sacrificed to pollution and degradation, is actually very legal. So there isn't really a law to enforce to help them. If we pass the New Jersey Green Amendment, now it's unconstitutional. So there is now actually a legal tool that those communities can use to defend themselves. Even when the law says it's okay, the Constitution may say it's not. Now, you are right, to bring a lawsuit means you have to have access to resources. But first you have to have something to challenge, right? Now you have something to challenge. You do need access to resources. But as the senator says, and while certainly it's going to be easier for somebody who's very wealthy to get a lawyer to step up and help them fight whatever it is they want to fight near their property, it will be harder for environmental justice communities. But there are a lot of law clinics, there are a lot of foundations, there are a lot of good-minded lawyers who want to help and make a difference. And they do step up and they do step in and they will take on key precedent-setting cases. And once we set a precedent that something is unconstitutional based on environmental justice grounds, we've now set a precedent that will raise the bar across the lay of New Jersey. And we just keep stepping it up that way. That should make it easier and easier to get critical protections without having to litigate. But yes, you will have to litigate, and there are thankfully good people who are out there who will help find those key cases, and now you can actually do it. But before this, for many of those cases, okay, you can have it, people can be throwing boatloads of money at you. And then what are you doing? You're filing a frivolous lawsuit because you don't actually have legal grounds upon which to file. With the amendment and the way we're talking about it and its placement and language, you now have the legal tool you need to actually bring a meaningful case.
And Newark specifically has very capable community-based organizations that can bring these lawsuits.
Other questions?
So, Andrew, I had a question about the climate amendment, if you can tell us something about it that Maya was alluding to. So there was she was saying that we'll be fourth in the nation, but first for the climate. And along these lines, I was thinking, could someone who has a expensive house on the beach sue the state to protect their house or a safe climate? So yeah, okay.
So it's up
But
there
every
and it's there.
but every word in this really matters, right? So that's why. So this will be the first time there, and you're suggesting what?
So my suggestion is, okay, so a safe climate, so we think about climate mitigation, adaptation, and vulnerability. Now, does that give citizens the right for the state to protect them from climate change in what way? Because, we then the state can say, okay, we are, with a safe climate, we now have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. But climate change is happening, so now there's going to be repercussions, flooding, heat. So on the adaptation side, there's a lot of things that the state should or could do to protect the citizens from the repercussions. So what legal right would that give the citizens to sue this? Sue
Like
for protection.
To build a piece of infrastructure.
To-
And it's not.
For
Yeah.
example, let me
or to
give you a
flip it
concrete
maybe.
example.
Build a levee.
Yeah, or to build to
So-
flip
so
it maybe. Yeah.
So the levy would be the exact example.
Right.
Would that give communities the right to sue to have the levy built?
Right.
No.
No, and nor, right, I can see from my
I'm being the business community.
yeah, right. We also know we haven't seen it in any other states, right? They have argued, could you use this against climate change? Could you flip it on? That's where I thought you were going to. And right, and we've seen no evidence of this.
This
right.
says the right to a safe climate. This
Yeah.
doesn't say the right to a wall to protect you from
Right.
climate-induced flooding. The building of infrastructure or
Right.
structures is different, right, than the entitlement to a safe
Right.
climate. And the point that Dave was whispering, in our ear to always remind us, this does provide government the ability to do better. So now on climate, there's so much effort in the legislature, and talk about it in the governor's office, to do better about climate. And so there's lots of
Right.
pieces of legislation. But this says if you're in the context of a permitting decision about fossil fuel emissions, and maybe the existing law doesn't give the DEP a handle to do something better, maybe the Constitution will. But it's all going to depend on context. We can do a gazillion hypotheticals, and I'm happy to hypothetical with you away. But some of the hypotheticals, right, it's all very fact-based. But building a structure, forcing government to buy your home, that I do not see how that gets read into this language.
Right. But that is a talking point against the amendment these days. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a question actually related to the language used in the text here. So you mentioned the importance of both present but also future generations. So I was wondering if you could speak to like the language of future generations, specifically how common is it for future generations concerning to be found in constitutions? And second, on top of that, like how can these intergenerational equity concerns be operationalized and also like institutionalized under the New Jersey Green Act?
So I'll just say quickly one thing, and then I'll pass it
Yeah,
on
please,
to you, right?
because I don't know about other New Jersey laws.
Yeah, so to me, that's so incredibly important, and Maya will talk about it legally as well, because the political system that we work in New Jersey is basically designed to handle the immediate, whether that's the one-year budget cycle that we work under, or that's a law that says what we're doing right now. The fact that this says, for wherever it is, future generations has to be a consideration, I think changes the dynamic from a political perspective in a really important way. Because, for example, and Dave knows this, I've been part of a long-term struggle to get the state to look at greenhouse gases scientifically properly, accurately. Methane is not the same thing as CO2 in a variety of different ways, including how long it lasts in the atmosphere. Getting the State Department of Environmental Protection to handle those gases differently and think about them decades ahead, and what they're doing now has been a big struggle. So I'm thrilled that that's here, right? But that's a political answer.
But it's a good political answer because the Green Amendment will help, with the interpretation and application of that legislation once it's passed. Yeah. But in terms of generational language, so there's generational language in Pennsylvania's amendment. Pennsylvania has by far the best existing Green Amendment. Doesn't mean it's perfect, and it doesn't mean there aren't a few things in it that I don't like. And we're fixing them, as the senator said, in New Jersey's language. Montana has generational language. New York has the bare minimum basics of what you need to meet my Green Amendment definition. The people have a right to clean water and air and a healthful environment, but there's no generational language there. In most of the Green Amendment proposals nationwide, all those 18 plus states, generational language for the most part is in there because it's essential. It is legally meaningful, and we have actually demonstrated that in Pennsylvania, where the court has made very, very clear that by having an entitlement of future generations to healthy natural resources, an obligation for government to protect them for future generations as well as present generations, does require the balancing. And what the court has made very clear is that language means that you have to ensure quality, healthy natural resources for future generations, right? You have to, however it is you think about it, whenever government is acting, it has to be acting in a way that ensures that quality environment for future generations. This language does not mean we all get to gobble up what we want to today, and then future generations get the leftovers, and then when you get there, you got to protect what's been left over for them. No, you have to protect equitably present and future. So legally, it has been demonstrated to be meaningful, substantive, interpretable, and enforceable. So that's how you operationalize it. You just look at every single decision and say, okay, what does it mean 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, 200 years from now? Are we ensuring that we're operationalizing this government action or decision in a way that will protect future generations? If not, we either have to amend that action so it does provide generational protection, or declare it unconstitutional and it goes away.
I had a question, given the lay of the land at the national stage. Let's say this looks like it's going to pass in New Jersey, you're optimistic, and it's great. Now,
That's not what.
so let's say a state passes an amendment like this, and then some case goes to the Supreme Court of the United States. And the Supreme Court decide in a slightly
It would go to our Supreme. It could go to
precedent.
our Supreme Court, right? It would, if it got challenged on constitutional grounds, it's a state-only amendment, so it would only go to the New Jersey State Supreme Court.
Okay, but let's say there's like a specific case about, that inalienable rights of people to clean and air and water. And let's say a case of the sort goes to the U.S. Supreme Court, and it rules that we don't. Which takes precedent if the people
Federal.
approved it in a state?
Federal.
What happens? I don't know.
Federal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So-
always federal.
Yeah, I mean, we need a federal Green Amendment, and we're going to be working towards that. The truth is, in New Jersey, across the United States, there is a division of labor between the state government and the federal government when it comes to the environment. And traditionally, how it's worked, writ large, right, the federal government sets the floor, and states can do better. And so that's what this is about, is the state doing better. So you're not going to see the kind of constitutional challenge you're talking about. Now, you might have a specific context. This does not mean that state law cannot be preempted by direct federal action, like in fracked gas pipelines that are cross state lines. There is specific preemption of state authority when it comes to those pipelines. That preemption still exists in that context. So maybe there'll be some Supreme Court decision in a particular context, but the kind of broad, sweeping characterization that you're talking about, I couldn't even imagine the situation where that might happen. But it is one of the reasons why we will also fight for a federal Green Amendment, so that actually can happen.
I mean, there's a national debate right now outside of environmental policy that it gets exactly what Maya's talking about, which is regardless of wherever you may be personally on abortion and reproductive access care, that's what the debate is right now, is what happens if the Supreme Court and the legislature continue to do what they're doing. It would then undermine what we've done at this state, right? But it's a very specific context. Go ahead. Yeah.
I have a follow-up question. It's kind of slightly different, but in terms of even this map here that you're showing, a lot of different states have a Missouri system. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to, why you have, like, something like Tennessee or West Virginia, right, considering, and the states that aren't, like, are there specific, like, attributes in those states that, are pointing them to go after this? Is it about, learning from other states, or is it about industry? Like, what do you think are some of the reasons that there is adoption, or, some states have adoption?
Well, I'm just going to tell you how I determine where I work. So since I founded the movement, my job is to go spread the good word, try to inspire people to pursue this pathway. And then when they want to pursue this pathway, to become a partner and an expert to help them make it happen. Every state, what that partnership is, looks different. I have a rule. This is my big joke. You better laugh. I always say that I'm kind of like a vampire, right? You know how Dracula cannot go into a house until he's invited in? Well, that's how I operate on the Green Amendment movement. Unless somebody within a state says, hey, Maya, we want to do this. Come on in and help us. I won't. It's not my job to go into Louisiana or Oklahoma and say, you should do this. It's the job of the people in Louisiana, and Oklahoma, and New Mexico, and Arizona to say, hey, we want to do this. Will you help us? So every single one of the states in color has a different origin story. Sometimes it was an organization, an environmental or social justice or environmental justice organization that wanted to do this and led the way. Sometimes it was a great legislator that said, I want to do this. Hey, how do I do this? Sometimes it was literally a single individual. Two of the stories in my book about two of the most powerful efforts, New Mexico and Maine, one person read my book, heard a podcast, somehow got the word, and called me up. And that's how it started. And we just started to work together. So the truth is, in every one of these states, they're all very different in terms of personality and politics and culture. But in every single one of them, there was a someone or something that really, really cared and got in touch.
Just kind of like a follow-up on that, because you mentioned that in Pennsylvania and Montana, they passed like back in the 70s, and then the next case we have is New York, which is just 2 years ago. But there was like many decades in between. What happened through that many decades?
Oh, I can answer that.
Yeah, I mean that's essentially it. Is the language was passed like it really started with Pennsylvania Senator Curry. He's an elder statesman now. He's no longer in office, but he's awesome. He testified at our New Jersey Green Amendment hearing. I asked him, "Would you testify?" And he was right there. But he had this fantastic idea, and I talk about him in the book and in another version of my talk. But the problem is, and then Montana saw it, and the next year they did it through the convention, constitutional convention process. But in both cases, for different reasons, the amendment was passed and then kind of went fallow for a long time. So, and people, particularly in Pennsylvania, people would get up and they would quote, I have a right to pure water and clean air. And then government officials and judges would say, yeah, it's there in the Constitution, but it's just policy. And under the law, policy is advice. And you can take it or you can leave it. And in Pennsylvania, you can leave it. And it was policy because the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said, this is just policy. They misinterpreted and misapplied the law, robbed the amendment of its legal life, so it did nothing. So people quoted it, but it did nothing. It was only in our 2013 victory when Chief Justice Ronald Castile said, for 42 years, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has been reading and applying this amendment wrong. In fact, all you have to do with regards to the Pennsylvania Green Amendment is read the plain language of the amendment. The plain language is that the people have a right and they can enforce it. And it changed the entire landscape legally. And then that is, I mean, I did literally then sort of decide we needed to have this everywhere. And I just started going around the country trying to tell people about this, identifying those key characteristics, writing the book, doing whatever I can to get people, please, please pay attention. And nobody did for a long time. And then all of a sudden, lots of people did. And now we have a real movement. But that it was just because for decades they didn't make a difference until somebody properly enforced them. And then people could see the power once it was explained to them.
So in closing, because we're almost out of time, I want to ask you both a closing question.
All right.
So Andrew, you jumped from science to politics.
Yeah.
And Maya, you could have been have an easy life as a lawyer. You jumped into this fray. So we have a lot of students here in science and policy. So how did you make that decision, and what's the most rewarding and frustrating thing in going into trying to make policy?
Okay. Wow.
So
Well,
why did you
yeah, I mean, it's really what are you doing, right? That's just polite way. So I've been at the Plasma Physics Laboratory for 25 years, and I was very frustrated over the lack of understanding in Congress about even funding something like fusion, funding renewable energy. The person who hired me to become a full-time Princeton employee was Rush Holt, the former congressman. My congressman is a rocket scientist. You can still, every once in a while, see a car with that bumper sticker. And when he retired, the person who replaced him came to me and said, would I run for Congress? And I had never thought about myself as an elected official, but other people saw me that way. And so the first, that person who was my boss, you want to run for Congress, there's only one rational, reasonable answer to give when someone says, do you want to run for Congress? Right? Right. It is no, and you run the other way. And then a grad student came to me, a PPL, Princeton grad student in astrophysics, came to me and said, hey, I hear you're running for Congress. I just turned in my thesis. Can I be your campaign manager? And I was like, wait, what? I claim, and I have no evidence, so I ran for Congress, right? Because I was so frustrated. And why not, right? Why not me? There's been 3 physicists in Congress. I wanted to be the 4th. 1 Republican, 2 Democrats, which I think is an important point, is that it doesn't have to be partisan. Why not me? And so I did, and I lost less worse than anyone ever imagined. And then I ran the next year for the General Assembly, the State Assembly, the lower house. It was the biggest upset in the whole state. 34,000 people voted, and I won by 78 votes. So don't ever let anyone ever tell you your vote doesn't matter, because it really does. I won my last election this past November by 14,000 votes. So I've extrapolated. 3 more elections, I'll win by 110%. You have to choose very carefully when you use that joke, because that falls really flat in other places.
Also, what's been the most rewarding, frustrating thing?
Yeah, so you said in the very kind introduction, I have been doing lots of things. I've been on campus a lot. I miss working with students. I had a lab over at PPL. I got to do my research, blah, 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 blah. In return, I now get to do something to have an impact on 9 million people. That's really the most rewarding thing. And I have a staff with me who get to do little things. I'm going to tell you a quick story just because you asked. It's been the most rewarding thing that's happened to me in the last 6 months. We got a phone call in my office from a constituent who was behind on their cell phone bill and unemployed. And we made a phone call to Verizon, that's the only name I'll use, arranged for there to be a payment plan, blah, 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 blah. And we got an email 3, 4, 5, 6 months later that said that phone call was the tipping point. Because from that I had my phone, that's how I was trying to get a job, and from the job I got a new job, and now I'm not behind on my rent or my cell phone, et cetera, et cetera. The ability to help people is by far the most rewarding thing ever. I used to spend day after day in the laboratory with plasmas. Or my PhD was studying impurities that are going into a fusion reactor. And I can tell you to this day, it's the same thing. Impurities come, you don't want impurities, right? But they come in, they go out. Sometimes they come in a little bit more. I used to model them. I would measure them with a spectrometer, then I'd model them. And I have friends and colleagues who are still doing that, and they were so much better at it than I am. So I had hints. So you asked me that question before, that I was going to go on a different path. To anybody here who is thinking about doing public policy, however you want to do it, you got to do the science first. But I would urge you that if you're interested, I'll offer it up right now. I'm ready to work with any of you right now on state policy, whatever it might be. Get involved. Running for elected office is really hard. Being judged by so many people, right? What are you judged by? The quality of your research right now. Being judged by people is really hard. And decisions are made not by logic or not by data, but by a lot of different, you hope logic and data is a piece of the decision. I would urge you to get involved at the local or the municipal or the county or the state or the federal level, even as a grad student or as a postdoc. All the faculty members, same thing, right? That's my little pitch to everybody, but I mean it. I am happy. You are my secret weapon in terms of, one more quick story. Sorry, and then I'll turn it over. I know we're running out of time. Wait, hold on. Okay, so I'll be quick. So I'm running for Congress, and there's a debate between me and it's a Democratic primary, 3 others, highly experienced, right? And I found out that it was quote unquote open book, so to speak. You'd have all the notes you want. So I hired the Princeton High School debate team. And by hire, I mean I bought them pizza. And they kicked my butt. But in return, it's the first headline I ever got in any press anywhere. And the headline was, and I quote, "Perceived no-hoper Zwicker wins the Princeton debate." And all my, and I'm friends with everyone I ran against, right? But they didn't have anything. The second debate, all of them had a policy book right there and had just copied what I had done. So I don't know how I got into that story, but what was the question?
That's a great story. The only thing I'm just going to finish, the senator said get involved. Yeah. Get involved. Yeah. njgreenamendment.org for New Jersey, forthegenerations.org for any of the other states. Every website has an action page. If you're from a different state, all the active states you can get to from forthegenerations.org. Go find out what's happening. But in New Jersey, there's supposed to be another hearing coming up, right? We're hoping for another hearing. We need testifiers. We need people to come in, either speak, sit there and wear your sticker that says, I support the New Jersey Green Amendment. You'll walk in, you'll put in a little slip that says, I support, and either I want to testify or I don't, no need to testify, but the I support slip makes a difference. So this is how I say, for this immediate present, grab hold of what the senator said. There's information up here. Go to these websites. Make a difference. Help save the world by getting a constitutional right for all New Jerseyans to a clean, safe, and healthy environment.
So anyway, thank you. I know we're running late, but thank you to inviting us, and so glad that Maya could join us. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Maya.